Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast, season 12, episode 9. Good to be with you again, live every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We've got a great show for you today. Myself and Allie are back again. Welcome back, Allie.
Hello, thank you.
And we have special guest with us, Julian Post. Welcome, Julian.
Hi, everybody.
Good to have you with us. We will learn more about Julian and his story. He's got a very, very exciting story to share with us, and we will learn more about that later in the show. So stick around. As always, the Built on Air podcast is a weekly show about an hour long. We talk about all things Airtable and go through a couple segments. I'll talk about what we're going to be doing today. We always start with our Around the Bases, keep you up to date on what's new and fresh in the Airtable communities. Then we'll do a spotlight on our primary sponsor, On2Air. Then we'll learn about Julian and his story and how he came into the world of Airtable. And then Julian will share some cool tricks and automations in dealing with looping or overcoming the lack of looping in Airtable. And then a quick shout out to our community at BuiltOnAir. And then Allie will walk us through Softer.io and how that works. So great show for you. Let's begin with our Around the Bases and see what's going on. Another relatively quiet front on the Airtable world. There was this tidbit from Jan, friend of the show, databaser in the community. And he shows a snippet. This is inside the forms. There's now this toggle that says collect respondent email addresses automatically, sign in required. And so he has this showing up on at least some forms. I have not seen this yet. Have either of you seen this in your forms?
No, I haven't, but I could imagine that would be super powerful with the new interface permissions. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So what it does is, and he talks through this use case of basically kind of using this feature as kind of a portal feature. But basically what it does is if you turn this on, then in order to fill out the form, somebody has to have an Airtable account. Mm-hmm. And so they'll sign up, and then when they fill out the form, you can, I believe you can specify a email field, and it will put the email of the logged in user into that record that it creates. Mm-hmm. And so he talks about it, kind of a use case, kind of like, can I build this? And like, is this possible to use this as kind of a mini portal solution? And kind of walks through the use case for that and how you can then tie that so they could potentially, you could pre-fill a form, they could fill it out, and it's tied to their user email, and then use that email to tie it back to a record to update via an automation or something. So that is possible. You could also do that now with like the record ID, although that's maybe a little less secure because the record ID would be in the URL. But so this is a little bit more of a secure approach.
Yeah, I think, does he talk any about like if you're actually adding them as a user to?
Like, so I don't know if it adds them as a user to the base, maybe as a read-only user.
Right. That's what I was thinking about, is like, it could get dangerous if, I don't think it would actually add them. That's just thinking through logically. But something I was thinking about trying out the other day was using, like, you can create a link to like a share link that actually is, it prompts somebody to log in, and you've already like set it up to be a read-only user. That's right. Kind of something I was thinking about playing with. I haven't had a chance to yet, but I wonder, just tying this in with that a little in my head.
Yeah, Jan might be listening, watching the show. If you are, comment Jan and let us know. I believe he says right here, so no access to the base. So it looks like they create, it's really good, like a growth marketing tool for Airtable, because they're getting people to create Airtable accounts, but it looks like it doesn't add you as a read-only or any kind of user to the base itself.
Which
It
I would
just,
expect. Yeah.
yeah, but you do get their email as part of the form submission. So that's cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's all.
Yeah, so that's a cool little feature. We'll see as that rolls out. Some people are mentioning it's not available to everyone, so they might just be doing some maybe testing with it. So give it a try if you have access to it. And that's where, when was it? A couple months, maybe 6 months ago, they changed the created by to where it can be an email address of somebody that doesn't have access to the base. So they don't have to be a user to show up in the created by. It could just be an email.
Okay.
And so this plays off of that. Maybe that was a precursor to building this kind of functionality.
Definitely.
So that's kind of cool. Check that out. Thanks, Jan, for addressing that. So yeah, that was the only kind of announcement that I saw from Airtable. Well, this isn't from Airtable, but any changes or updates. I take that back. I'm going to jump. There is one more. So we talked about this, but last Tuesday after the show, it did go live, the ability to specify a time zone.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so now you can pick one time zone that it shows for everybody in that time zone and displays the time zone. So that's been in beta for a while, but it looks like it went to everyone on Tuesday.
Yeah,
that was a very needed feature.
Yeah. It's interesting. There is still, you can't specify this if there's no time, which you would think you wouldn't need to, but we're actually running into a bug. I think we've got it resolved for our OnTerra forms, but it's related to, there's still issues with full dates without time and time zones where it might show up a day later or day before. And I've seen people in the community talk about that issue as well.
Yeah.
Maddening.
Yeah. So it's still something to be aware of, even if you're not using times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with automations, sometimes like if it's, an automation based on changing from one day to another, then it does it in Greenwich Mean Time.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'll see. I haven't heard of many complaints like on the forums of this like breaking stuff or anything. So seems to be a relatively good one.
Yeah, they rolled out when they rolled out this update, they made it non-breaking so that any fields that you have currently that are date fields or date time fields, if you're still trying to update them with the API, you still can in the same way. That's at least my understanding. Everything kind of works the same way until you update that field or create a new one, then the changes take effect.
Gotcha.
I think that's if I read it correctly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm assuming, by default, the way it handled before this was your local time was the default time zone, right? Yeah.
I noticed, tell me if I'm crazy or not, but I think at one point within, the last 5 years or so, people have been wanting the date format, that like first drop down in that screenshot there, where it says local. You couldn't have it have a European display. Like it would, like today would be, what's today, the 8th? They would say like 8/11 instead of 11/8, but like you can now.
Is that new?
I don't know. I just noticed the other day, one of my colleagues that works in Ireland was like, he sent me a screenshot and it said 31/10/2022 on Halloween. And I was like, I didn't think that, because I remember people wanting that as an option, but I don't know if they silently released it. I don't know if anyone's watching and knows, but either way.
I know, yeah, it's definitely an option now. I feel like it's always been an option. I think people wanted a way to like mass do that for all dates in the base or your account or something. Just so you don't have to go to each one individually. But I think it's always been there.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, not using it myself.
Either.
Yeah. So that so that's new as of last week. So try that out. Definitely comes in handy. Now might be a good time to talk about, so today is potentially a big day. It was I'll give a shout out to Justin, who named it Airmageddon. Justin on a call last week named this Airmageddon, Justin Barrett, and so we'll see. So what that's referring to is the attachments. Today is supposed to be the day when attachments switch over to expiring URLs. So I didn't look this morning to see if that's the case, but likely sometime today.
So, I did look. My links still work. I have a few formulas that are referencing attachment fields, and they are working as of right before we started this podcast. So I'm going to keep looking at them throughout the day just to check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know that will have some ripple effects, and Kavan says she's not seeing any difference yet in URLs. So
excellent.
That is good. So we shall see. We'll definitely talk about that next week and see how bad it was. Yeah. All right. Next, let's pull up from Twitter. I always like to see like discussions of what's going on in the Twitter universe, people talking about Airtable. This is a venture capitalist talking about how to organize founder company notes and getting people's feedback on Airtable versus Notion, and some pretty interesting conversation. At first, she said, looks like Notion's the winner, which probably for if you're talking about like storing notes and whatnot, Airtable probably isn't the best note solution. Document driven. Notion's definitely more in that realm.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Yeah. There are some people that said Team Airtable and shared some cool links with some templates. So if you're in the world of investing and want to track all your stuff, there's this one. There's also, I think we shared this last week. This Alex Oppenheimer shared his bases for how he does his angel investing. And some other, and then there's also people that jump in with Coda and saying, Coda, you can do both, best of both.
I haven't tried Coda since I abandoned it like a year and a half ago. I think they've made some cool big changes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like nobody, there's like those passionate about it. Like here's one, Coda. And there's definitely a very passionate, but it doesn't seem to get the widespread adoption that Notion and Airtable have.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Notion like has people love it. Like it's crazy how much just on social media, especially like on YouTube and on TikTok, people are really into Notion. And so I think it is a fun comparison to make to Airtable, even though in many ways they're so different.
Yeah.
But once people get into Notion and start using the database features in it, then you can be like, you should really check out Airtable because you can do that and like 1,000 times more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and if it's anything like Coda, when you use the database features or like the tables in Coda, it affects the performance like very hardcore. Or it did at the time when I was using it a lot. You can't do any of the like complex things you can in Airtable without it slowing down.
That's funny to hear that Airtable is the faster solution because Airtable can also slow down.
Oh yeah, that's true. But I think they've made a bunch of performance enhancements across the board, both Coda and Airtable, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, always interest. I imagine, Julian, have you gone into doing posts for other platforms, or you still
Notion is
primarily?
the only one that I do.
Okay.
And that's, I try to keep to stuff that I use a lot, and
Uh-huh.
I do use Notion a lot. Like any kind of note taking, I do with Notion. Um, and I think like my best performing video on YouTube is a Notion video, even though
Interesting.
most of my videos are about Airtable. But again, I think it's fun to kind of try to poach Notion users once they start using databases.
Yeah.
And they're very complementary too. Like in my previous business that I'll talk about later, I set up a whole dashboard that had a lot of like Airtable extensions embedded in the Notion base, because it's just a nice way to have like a public dashboard, which interfaces kind of has somewhat taken the place of, but you still can't just make them publicly available to anyone.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my impression. I like Notion. I use it as well for documentation. I don't think I'd use it for like workflow operations. I think Airtable is a better solution there. But anyways, here's a good question coming from the Reddit community. Which Airtable topic is the most difficult to understand? And so this is a vote. It looks like base design and integrations are the most on this voting. What would you vote for? Julian, I'd be curious on your post, what are most people asking for explanations on?
I love this poll. That's a great thing to know what people are struggling with. I think I would agree that, I mean, base design, like it depends obviously on how complicated your use case is, but I love that people are focused on that, because that's a lot of like what I try to do when I'm working with clients, is be really focused on, educating people on the importance of base design and what, the different consequences are.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those where to do it well, like to do it quick and dirty, it's pretty easy to jump in, but to really, if it gets complex, it definitely can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some good dialogue in here. What do you think, Allie? What's most difficult for you?
For me, I mean, I can't speak. Probably custom extensions that I've never even dove into that world, but that's not really the average Airtable user's world. But base design is something I see most of my clients struggling with and not really understanding, linking relationships and when you need another table versus a view.
Yeah. Very good. Brian Kinney jumping in. Interesting. See, voting is really close except for import export. That seems to be straightforward, although there are definitely some challenges with that as well. I'm guessing people just don't use it that often. But yeah, automations, integrations. Yeah, integrations. Although he doesn't have interfaces on this poll, I'd probably put interfaces on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
a whole new world.
I know. So much to do. Very cool. All right, we've got one more before we move on. This comes from the BuiltOnAir community. Friend of the show, Russell Bishop, asked, does anyone have a friendly replicable solution for currency conversion? So if you're looking to do currency conversion, there's some really good thoughts on this. Scott and Cherry, and then Andy, who built Data Fetcher, shows how to do that in Data Fetcher, which somebody else I think pointed out. But some cool stuff on there. But the one thing that I thought was interesting in this was his final comment of, why aren't we all sharing synced bases with helper data in it, like currency conversions, holidays, date periods? It's a good idea. I think BuiltOnAir, maybe we should do that.
That would be really cool, actually. I would love that. I think also, just to add to that list, I'm not sure if they've updated the examples, but in the scripting extension, Airtable comes with a built-in example on calling a free API to get a conversion rate.
Oh, cool.
So that's I think it's called currency converter. If you're looking in the,
Mm.
you add a new scripting extension and then look at the examples. I'm just verifying that as I'm speaking, but I think also you can go, currency converter, and it calls an API, exchange rate dot host, API.exchange rate dot host. And then I have taken that and turned it into a cron job in a couple of bases where it like runs every 15 minutes or every hour and updates a summary record. So just one table, one record on a table. So it just has the current for whatever that is that I'm tracking, like euros, for example.
Nice. Yeah, so there's some alternative options out there. Brian mentions, for some things like that idea of sharing, there might be licensing issues where you can't redistribute data. So that might make an issue with sharing data like that, but it would definitely be interesting to have a central base of like common data that people could sync in, especially when they come out with their new feature of kind of that, what do they call the data? The one source, that new feature that they announced.
Verified data.
Verified data. That's it. Yeah. If they'll have like common verified data sources.
That'd be cool.
Very cool. All right. That concludes round the bases of what's going on in the Airtable communities. Let us know if we missed anything. We'd love to talk about anything relevant of what's going on in any communities. So feel free to send us topics on what we should be talking about. With that, let's move on to OnToAir, primary sponsor. OnToAir is an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable. It's a suite of apps that enable any business dependent on Airtable to take their Airtable to the next level. So check it out if you are using Airtable to run your business at ontoair.com. We are continuing our discussion. We are in a private beta of our new forms application and getting great feedback from users and getting people starting to use it in production. Still have a few bugs and kinks to work out. So still keeping it in private beta till everything's kind of smoothened out and ready for that. But we are open to getting people into it. So if you want to try it out, reach out and we'll give you access to it. But just wanted to show kind of one thing that it can do. So when you add your fields, you can obviously add any Airtable field, and this shows you all the fields in your base that you could add to your form. Or I wanted to highlight our custom fields that you can add. So right now we have 3 custom fields. Over time, we'll add more. But these are things like adding a block of text that you can insert into your form, or a divider to separate out your forms into different groupings, or our custom formula that can do dynamic on the fly formula, anything from Excel like formulas we can generate on the fly to display or calculate your data from your form instantly. So it's just going to showcase our divider. So you can do some cool stuff with that. So this would typically be used to get some more room here, used to separate out your groupings. By default, it's just a single line there, but you can actually add text to separate it out. Like that. You can create separators. You can stylize it. You can put it on the left or right. You can increase the font size, make it super big. And so some cool stuff you can do there. I'll also put it in a badge. And So yeah, so cool stuff you can do with our separator, our divider widget, along with our other custom ones. And we have some plans to add more to that list of custom fields in addition to all of the fields that are available in Airtable. So check it out, ontoair.com, reach out, and we will get you access to our private beta. You can start playing with it and using it.
Very cool.
With that, let's move on. And we're going to meet our expert with us, Julian. Julian, welcome to the show officially. We'd love, Julian, tell us your story, I know you have an interesting previous life. Tell us, walk us through how you came into this world.
Sure. Yeah. So my background is in sustainable agriculture. That's what I went to college for, and I worked as a researcher. It focused on hops production. So hops are one of the main ingredients in beer, and it's a really cool plant. It grows 18 feet tall. So it grows on a trellis. It's like a very tall vineyard. And most hop farms are in the Pacific Northwest. There are very few in the Northeast. And so while I was a researcher, I met a guy who was interested in starting a farm, a hop farm. He actually used to live in Europe, and there's lots of hops grown there too. And so when he moved back to Vermont, he was curious why he didn't see any hops. So anyway, we started this hop farm that is now the largest hop farm in New England. It's, New England, most farms in New England are a pretty different scale than those Pacific Northwest farms still. But yeah, we work with lots of brewers in the state of Vermont, the majority of the brewers in Vermont, some in New Hampshire. Allie, don't ask me their names. I knew there's one called Reckless Brewing. Do you know that one?
I don't. But in Vermont, do you work with Fiddlehead?
We haven't worked with. They may have done like a one-off beer.
Cool.
Do you know like Foam or Burlington Beer Company?
I've been to Foam.
Or Lawson's.
Yep, that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, so I did that for 5 years, and during that time, all my systems were based in Excel. And actually, another farmer friend of mine started using Airtable, and she is like the most efficient, organized person I know. And so when I saw that she was using it, I knew I should check it out. And the rest is history. I immediately became obsessed and put all of our systems into it. So at the farm, our inventory, customer database, I tracked a lot of like crop information through it. And we also did payroll, which is part of what I'm going to show you later. So basically, a lot of people were hourly on the farm, and so they tracked all of their hours through Airtable forms. So anyway, I got super into it, and then last summer I started a TikTok account, just sharing tips about how to use Airtable, which ended up doing pretty well. And was kind of the catalyst for eventually striking out as an Airtable consultant. I started to get clients through TikTok, and then I eventually decided to go full time doing that work.
Did you go into the TikTok? Was that just kind of for fun? Like, was the plan to kind of go into the consulting world and step away, or did that just happen?
Yeah, I just moved to New York City also, and that was kind of on my mind of like, how can I figure out a career move that will land me in New York City? And so that was, it was kind of backed out from there. But yeah, I don't know that there was a ton of intention behind the TikTok, but it was definitely like, that would be cool if this turned into, something that would lead towards, towards that.
Yeah, definitely. If people haven't checked out your TikTok. They've got some pretty funny videos on there. Spend a lot of time. Tell me about that experience. What's it's been like being a TikTok celebrity?
TikTok is really fun. It's also a black hole. Like you can get sucked in and lose hours of your life very easily. But it's got a ton of creativity and just has a good vibe in general, I think, in comparison to some other social media platforms. So it's been really fun to be a part of that community. I think one other really cool thing about TikTok is that it's very focused on discoverability. And so it's good for things that are not like in the general, like, I don't know, brain yet, like that people just haven't heard of yet, which is very much what Airtable is. It's like so many people, when they discover that they can do certain things in Airtable, their mind is blown and they're like so excited about it. And so I think it is a really good platform for that. I've actually recently, over in the past 4 months, been spending a lot of time creating YouTube videos because just, the long form and full screen nature is a lot easier to teach some more technical stuff in Airtable. So they all have their place, but yeah, TikTok is really fun.
Yeah. And that's really the primary driver for the consulting business. That's where most of your leads come from.
Yeah. And then, now referrals, but definitely, yeah, any kind of like cold leads, I guess you could say, are through TikTok or YouTube.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So YouTube, and you doing shorts on YouTube or just all long form?
I've started to repost the TikToks on there.
Shorts.
Yeah, I think shorts is cool. One cool thing about the YouTube shorts is that you can connect them to your long form video, or like you can basically cut up a long form video into a short. And then if people want to watch the whole thing, they can click to it. So it's a fun kind of way to preview a full video.
Yeah, I know that's something I've been meaning to do with our show and cut it up, but just haven't had the time to go down that path.
Oh yeah, you could have some great highlights.
Yeah, definitely.
Have the highlight reel.
So what's the future? What do you see yourself doing with this now that you've got kind of a platform?
Right now I'm really interested in YouTube, like I said, just because it's kind of gives you a little bit more ability to share, longer form stuff and get into more technical stuff. So I'm really into that. And yeah, just to try to share Airtable with more people. And I think, yeah, it's really fun to get feedback. Like, so what you're, the poll that you put out, like, I think that's a really cool piece of creating videos on any social media platform is you get so much feedback in the comments, and it's great for, new content ideas, but also just to kind of see like what people are working on and what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious.
I go into the comments on Gareth's videos all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Is there an industry for, I know you modeled yours after Miss XL. Is that true? Or
yeah.
I know she's got a very big following. Is there sort of like an industry for the B2B side of these social media platforms? Is there conferences? Is that like still very early stages? What do you think of, using those platforms for this B2B stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Have you guys heard of Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah.
So he's like the social media guru, and he's like got, if you get on there, you'll get hammered with his content if you search for him. But he is like, he's really smart and very like focused on this whole like social media ecosystem, and everywhere from, consumer to business. And like, he now runs a firm that works for like very large companies, like Fortune 500 companies that are doing marketing. And he would say that all business marketing should be on social media now, basically. And that like all of the other kind of traditional forms of advertising will continue to shrink, and social media will continue to be a larger portion of that. And I take his word for it. I think, there's still a place for all these other ones, but it is like, I do like the idea of on social media where you're basically like, you can promote products by providing value to the person who's watching by giving them tips, or even if it's just funny or entertaining. But that's kind of like, I think the cool thing about marketing through social media is you're basically creating something that is just like inherently valuable to the person who's watching it. And then if they enjoy it, then they're more likely to like follow up, or they learn something new and they want to keep learning from you, or buy your product or whatever.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Excited to see where this takes you. I imagine you didn't envision yourself in this position when you were starting your brewery.
Definitely not.
That's awesome. All right. We are going to move on. And Julian, you're going to walk us through some cool automation stuff. I will share your screen. There you go. Take it away.
All right. So, so I talked about payroll before. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can't see you. So actually, maybe I'll see if I can get you in the corner just so I know you're there. So my general theme, I guess that I wanted to, to tie these together with was in Airtable, you don't have a way without using a script to kind of loop through records in different situations. And so I have two examples of how to get around that are like on complete different ends of the spectrum. So the first one is, I mentioned before that my farm business had our payroll system was in Airtable. And so everyone submitted hours into the system. And one of my biggest challenges right off the bat was how to deal with pay periods. Because anything with dates and times is inherently a little bit complicated. Specifically pay periods. So we were on a 2-week pay period. So it's, a week is Sunday to Saturday, and it's 2 of those weeks. And so you can't just write kind of an easy formula that says like the 1st of the month and the 15th of the month or something like that. And because you can't, kind of loop through records or have kind of like a conditional, like dynamically conditional roll up that can compare to a date. Like, so someone is, entering their hours today, November 8th. How do you find out which pay period that's in and what the range is? And you can't just take, so this would be like a schedule for, all of your different pay periods. You can't just compare it to this and then have Airtable spit out an answer. So what I was doing initially was just having people like pick the pay period from a list, and to have like a view that was filtered so that it would only show like the current pay period, but they still had to click it. But then eventually I figured out that you actually can write a pretty simple formula that will, if you give it any date, it will tell you the start of the pay period and the end of the pay period, and the number of the pay period within the current year. And all the formula needs to know is like the date of the first pay period. So like whatever back in time, could be 20 years ago, the first one. Any or any ideas of how you would do that?
The mod function or dividing. Yeah, you calculate how many weeks it's been and then see what week you are in the year and do all of, the division.
Yeah. So it's like that. So pay periods start, I can open this one up. But basically, it takes like the number of days it's been since that first pay period to the current date and divides it by 14. And then you get a fractional number because it's like somewhere within that pay period. But then if you just round down, then you get a whole number. And then if you multiply that by 14, you get back to the start of that pay period. So anyway, I was really excited when I found this out because it made everything so much easier. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said absolutely. That's awesome.
So that was my little trick in this. And then the pay period number is also pretty similar, but the trick here was how to get the number within the current year. So you're gonna have generally 26 pay periods within a year, but they could start on the 1st or even as late as like the 13th. And so how do you know like when the first one is? And so it uses a similar calculation by dividing, by basically finding the start of the current pay period for the whatever date you're calculating from, and then counting the number of days since the last day of the previous year, and then doing the same calculation. So anyway, if anyone is working with pay periods, this is useful, and you could pretty easily adapt it to, like a different number of days, like if you're on a 1 week versus a 2 week, something like that.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, so that's that. Or sorry, Allie.
I was just gonna say it's a super creative solution because if it were just 1 week pay periods, you could use just week and year, whatever. But for having a 2-week pay period, that makes it super complicated, right? So I really love your solution. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Of course.
Okay, so going now in a completely opposite direction. One thing but still within the kind of looping theme, one thing that I think will be kind of like a really good indicator that the Airtable interfaces and just like the whole kind of Airtable mission is succeeding is when we can start to recreate basic SaaS products. And so one that I think that I just recently started seeing we're not that far away from like basically creating this entirely in Airtable is email marketing. So like ConvertKit, or there's a ton of different email marketing platforms that are pretty simple. They and actually here, I'm just going to pull this out. These are like the things that they do. They send email sequences. So like that's like if someone signs up, they get like a sequence of 5 pre-written emails that are spaced 2 days apart or something like that. Mm-hmm. Personalized emails. So like if you know their name, saying hi Dan, hi Allie, and then writing the rest of your email, creating landing pages, and then like scheduling mass emails and deliverability. And so I checked off the boxes of things that you can currently do in Airtable and the ones that were like not quite there yet. I think that the SendGrid integration is super cool, and I wish you could automate that. So hopefully they'll do that at some point. But so the email sequences is what I want to show here because I just worked out a way to do that. Just real quick, the landing pages, the way I would handle this, and I really want to do this at some point, but I haven't yet. So do you guys use Webflow?
Dabbled.
Know of it, yeah.
It's like a whole world to get into. So same thing, like I've used it. My site is in Webflow, but I hired someone to do most of it. And but one really cool thing about Webflow is that it has a CMS backend, and so it does have databases, and you can create basically like a landing page template. So it's like, you know, a basic thing that, you know, it's always going to have a picture at the top, and then it's going to ask for someone's email, and it has like a title. And so like a way that you could use this landing page template, like the way that I would use it would be like, so I create all these tutorials on YouTube for different kinds of things you can create in Airtable. And often I'll have a template that people can download in exchange for their email address. And so I want to create all these landing pages that are basically the same exact thing, but they have a different title and a different template. And so in Webflow, you can basically just have a table that has like the list of all the titles and the URLs, and it will automatically just generate all of these pages. And because of the integrations between Webflow and Airtable, you could easily, I think, fairly easily set up an Airtable table and just create landing pages from your Airtable database automatically. You might need to use Make or Zapier to connect them a couple of different ways. But anyway, so that's totally possible now. And then the sequences, I'll just quickly kind of walk through how I set up the sequences. So actually, I need this so I can walk you. Sorry, I've got my list of. So so the user would submit a form. So someone gets to the landing page and they enter their email address, and you've got this table where the emails come in, and then their name, and then you would have, so you'd have the form automatically pre-fill which sequence they're a part of, and then the sign up date, or this could just be a date created field, and then you can set up this formula here that just says the number of days that's been since they signed up, since they filled out the form and gave you their email address. And when you do that, then there's two other tables here. So there's a sequences table, and then, so this just has one sequence in it, the intro to Airtable. And Dan, let me know if I'm going too long or how I'm doing on timing.
Yeah, I got a couple more minutes.
All right. So here's your sequence, and then the emails within the sequence would be here. So we've got our one sequence that has 3 different emails that you want to send, and then you have this field that says at how many days you send it. So you send one right off the bat, right when they submit the form. Then you have one that you send 3 days later, and then you have one that you send 6 days later. So the question is, how do you set up an automation that's going to email the right people the right number of days after they sign up? And so there's basically like 2 tricks to doing that in the way that I've set it up here. The first trick is to have this today field that just is a formula that just calculates the current day. And with this formula, you can set up an automation that will run when the record is updated. So when it changes from yesterday to today, it will fire the automation, and that just allows you to run a number of automations because you can't just say like, I want you to loop through all of the records in wherever. So that's just a way that can fire them all. And then the second thing, which I got from Scott when I was searching the community forum, was the idea to do that was to then use a find records automation. So then you would go and find any records. Let's see here. That's the next one here, to update to pull the email addresses. So you basically go in and you find any records where the days since the sign up match the email like number of days after that you want to send each email. So it'll basically, I don't think I explained it that well, but in the emails here, each email, it's going to search and say, okay, if any people who subscribed are linked to this email, so they're going to get this email at some point. If the send after X days matches the days since sign up, then it's going to take their email address and put it into this field that says who to email today. And then you basically just have a list of people to email this specific email to each day.
Love it.
Yeah, that's a
it.
great trick. Yeah, I love what you were saying, like, you know, seeing these SaaS solutions be built out in Airtable and perform at a similar level.
Mhm.
That's where, you know, when people really start using Airtable to replace all their SaaS solutions, that's huge.
Yeah, I would, like, for email marketing, I would love to do that for myself, just because, like, the thing that I don't like about, like, so I use ConvertKit now, which is pretty good. I don't have a lot of complaints about it, but you can't do a lot with your data once you have it. And it just would be so much nicer to just have your whole list, and you can tag people with whatever, you know, they're tagged with. And then you can just, I don't know, visualize your email list in so many better ways within Airtable system than like any kind of email marketing platform.
Yep. Very
Absolutely.
true. Awesome. Thank you, Julian, for sharing that. We will move on to the show. Just a quick shout out to our BuiltOnAir community. If you are not in our community, we'd love to have you join. Go to builtonair.com/join. That will get you into our Slack community, where we have thousands of Airtable enthusiasts sharing ideas, helping each other. So we'd love to have you in there. It's free to join at builtonair.com/join. And our final segment, we will learn about third-party, very popular app Softer. Allie's going to walk us through a use case there. Go for it, Allie.
Thank you. All right. So I've set up just a very, very simple template. I just grabbed literally a one-page template from Softer. We can probably do a deeper dive into all of this, but with a Softer account, you can have multiple applications. I have a bunch called Untitled just because I've been playing with it a lot. And then they also have some really, really cool templates to choose from. Highly recommend checking them out. So I'm going to pop into this one here, and I've already connected my API key, but there are videos out there on how to do that if you run into trouble. And I think just to keep things simple, I'm just going to walk through setting up an inventory page based on this base, which is a bunch of trucks, something I use often for an example. And I've set up, just as a little helper to save time, a view that I know I'm going to need in Softer, which is just called Units with Pictures. And I have it filtered down to only the units that I want. So this means status is available. We actually have pictures to show, and then we don't need to worry about this filter. That's just something on the back end. But now that I have that view, I'm just going to pop in over to Softer. And over here at the header here, you can only edit the header while you're on the home page, just so everybody knows. That's something I had to learn. But the header will appear on every page as long as you have this option toggled on. Also, they have all sorts of features where when you get a template, you might have like several versions of this header, and maybe I'll do a different demo another time talking about why that is, and user roles and permissions in Softer, because they're pretty powerful and getting more so. But to start, I'm just going to go and add a new page, and I'm going to call it inventory. And this is kind of cool. It shows you, what the URL is actually going to be. And I'm going to save that. And then actually I'm going to go edit my header and make sure that this button here that I've got at the top there actually opens up that page that I just created. So I'm going to choose open page and then choose inventory. So that's pretty simple. It all auto saves too, which is really, really cool. And then let's go look at the inventory page. So by default, it just comes with the header. But I'm going to add a block. And so Softer has two different block types. One's static and the other is dynamic. Static just means that these are things that are not going to change. They're always the same across all the pages. Like if I'm looking at the home page, this is a static block. This is also a static block. But we're going to go and add a dynamic block because we want to pull in some Airtable data from it. So the list block is the one that we want here. You could also use a table if you wanted to, because that can look pretty nice. But I like the list to go with for now because it's got these nice, pretty colorful cards. And I'm just going to pop one in. Let's just do this one. All right. So this is something that really confused me at first. I was like, where did all this data come from? I didn't understand like where these pictures were coming from. But they're just showing you like what the full thing can look like, and you can slowly replace each element or remove each element and replace it with your data. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab the API key that I put in, and then I'm going to choose my base, which is called NEK inventory. And I want the all current inventory table and that view units with pictures. So still, I was super confused. I was like, okay, shouldn't this maybe look different now? But it doesn't. So if you go into the features and scroll down, this item fields here is the next step, at least what I would consider. So if I go here and actually go to this content section for each image and put in pics, that's the name of my field. Now it's showing me actual photos. Pretty ugly though. So you could go into the style and I can change this to, let's do contain if we want. So it actually shows the full image. Also, I think I haven't verified yet if this is the first or last image in an attachment field. I would expect it to be the first, but just not sure. So I can come back to that in a later time. But then as we go through each of these, heading 3, it's actually lining up with this heading here. And I could put this in as a field called description. So now it's actually going to show me, you know, some info from my records. If I put text here, I don't necessarily need this one, so I could just hide it. I'm going to just hide the rest. Tags we don't need right now. For the sake of time, I'm going to go through the next step while ignoring this all categories, and maybe I could do another one next week on getting more in depth with this. But this is a cool thing about Softer. So right now, if I were to like preview this, nothing's going to happen when I click on one of those cards there. You can see they're highlighting, but they're not clickable. So I want to make those clickable and actually lead to a page where I'm going to have more information about that unit. So I want to add another page, and I'm just going to call it like inventory. Well, I can actually make this pretty details. And then if I'm clicking on this block and looking at my options over here, I want to scroll down to this action section, and I want this to say open page. And the page is going to be inventory details. So then when I go over to inventory details, I need the counterpart to that list block, which is called the list details block. And this isn't super intuitive, But when I pop that in here, by virtue of me connecting that list block on the previous page to this page, it knows now that I also have to, you know, pick the right base. But so we can put that all together. Let's just flip the image to pics. And then I'll make the heading the same thing. And this is also going to be a little confusing because this is not respecting the same view that I filtered it to, but it will look nice if I click on one of those images. So now I've got all the pictures of that truck, and I can see that is the one I clicked on.
That's cool.
Right? It makes it super, super powerful. There's a whole lot more we could get into, but I will save it for another time.
But it's just amazing. In 5 minutes, you built a fully functional listing and detail page.
Right? They've made like leaps and bounds in the past like year. It's really, really cool. Loving what you can do with a lot of their tools.
Yeah. It's Softer is like, I remember when it first launched and how far it's come, how fast they've developed so fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali, for sharing that. And
You're
that
welcome.
concludes our show for today. Thank you, Ali, and Julian. Thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you online, Julian.
That would be Julian Post on YouTube or iExcel with Airtable on TikTok.
Awesome. We're excited to see what you have in store, and we'll have you back on in a future episode to get an update.
Awesome.
And with that, that concludes what we built on air today. Always excited to show you next week, and we will see you then. Take care, everyone.
Great to see you guys.